Hello everyone, in this video I'll be going over a basic introduction to angles. Here I have two ramps for a toy car to drive up. This bottom ramp is twice as steep as the first one, and this ramp is 20 degrees, and we can see that this ramp is 40 degrees. Angles are measured in degrees, which is the same sounding and spelling as the degrees in temperature, so we have to try and not confuse them. And when we're writing an angle in degrees, we draw this little circle next to our number. Let's start by looking at angles between the hands of an analog clock. When the time is 3 o'clock, the hands will make a 90-degree angle, also known as a right angle. Whenever an angle is 90 degrees, we use a square to draw the angle. What about 6 o'clock? This angle is 180 degrees, also known as a straight angle. You've probably noticed that this angle is 90 degrees times 2. How about 9 o'clock? If we look at the smaller angle between 9 and 12, it is 90 degrees, just like 3 o'clock. But if we look at the outside angle, it's 270 degrees, which is 90 degrees times 3. Now, let's look at 12 o'clock. There is no angle between the hands, but the angle around them is 360 degrees, or a full rotation. Now, let's look at angles in other shapes, like rectangles and squares. Squares and rectangles have 4 right angles, which are 90 degrees each. And 90 degrees times 4 equals 360 degrees. We can also draw lines like this through the sides to indicate that all 4 sides are the same length. If they weren't, this wouldn't be a square. If we look at a rectangle, we know that the opposite sides are the same length. So we can draw 1 line on the short sides and 2 lines on the long sides. This shows that these 2 sides are the same length and these 2 sides are the same length. And again, if they weren't, this wouldn't be a rectangle. Here we have 2 more shapes. This is a trapezium, and this is a parallelogram. Let's start with the trapezium. Let's say this is a perfectly symmetrical trapezium. This would mean that these 2 angles are the same, and these 2 angles are the same. Let's say I was given one angle, which was this one, and let's say it was 60 degrees. Well, if this trapezium is symmetrical, then we know that these 2 lines are parallel. When sides are parallel, we draw an arrow through it, like this. Parallel means that if the lines were continuous in both directions, they would never meet or touch each other. They just keep going in straight lines. But with these 2 sides, they are angled, so they would end up touching if they kept going up this way. So these 2 sides are not parallel. If this angle is 60 degrees, then this angle is also 60 degrees. Now we just have to find out these 2 top ones. Now, any 4-sided shape, like these, squares, rectangles, etc., are known as quadrilaterals. In a quadrilateral, all of the angles will add up to 360 degrees. So, we can add these 2 60s, which equal 120. Then we'll take our total 360 degrees, take away the 120, and that equals 240 degrees. Now, if we have 240 degrees in 2 angles, we'll divide that by 2, and that equals 120 degrees each. Now, let's take a look at the parallelogram. A parallelogram means that both pairs of sides are parallel. So these sides are parallel. And with these 2, since they are a different pair, we will draw 2 arrows through them to indicate that these 2 sides are parallel and these 2 sides are parallel. And let's say we're given only one angle and we have to figure out the others. So let's say this angle was 50 degrees. But with a parallelogram, the angles opposite each other will be the same. So these two are the same, and these two are the same. So if this one's 50, this one is also 50 degrees. We'll use our same method, adding the two 50s, which is 100, and then taking it away from the total 360 degrees, and that equals 260 degrees. 260 degrees divided by 2 equals 130 degrees on each. Now, let's look at one more method to figure out these angles. Since these lines are parallel, it would sort of look like this. Now, we know a straight angle, which is just a straight line, is 180 degrees. If we have the 120 degrees here, we'll take that off, and 180 minus 120 means that this angle will be 60 degrees. And we can see that ended up being this angle. And just like the parallelogram, these angles are opposite, and these angles were opposite. We can do the same thing with the parallelogram. These sides are parallel, and if we know that this straight angle is 180, we'll take away the 50, which means that this angle would be 130 degrees, and we can see that this angle is also 130 degrees. And we can do the same thing for this angle. If this is 180 degrees and this is 130, that would mean that this angle would be 50 degrees. And we can see that these are opposite and these are opposite. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to angles, and in the next video we're going to be looking at angles in triangles, which is also known as trigonometry.